Hello and welcome to Mystery Tales channel, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today we delve into the fog-shrouded world of Victorian London with a brand new Sherlock Holmes adventure. Sherlock Holmes and the Dark Case Solved. Settle in with your favorite brew as Dr. John Watson recounts this tale of shadows, secrets, and singular deduction. Our story unfolds over 10 chapters, clocking in at around 90 minutes of cozy suspense. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our community of amateur detectives. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Arrival. The clock upon the mantel had just chimed 8, its measured tones muffled by the thick Turkish rug that absorbed sound as greedily as the London fog absorbed light. Rain pattered insistently against the tall sash windows, each droplet tracing silver paths down the glass before vanishing into the gloom. The fire in the grate burned low but steady, casting a warm amber glow across the cluttered room. Chemical apparatus upon the deal table, a violin case propped against the wall, and stacks of unanswered correspondence pinned beneath a jackknife driven into the wooden mantelpiece. Sherlock Holmes, my singular friend and companion, reclined in his mouse-colored dressing gown. His long legs stretched toward the fender, his hawk-like profile turned toward the leaping flames. I had returned scarcely an hour earlier from my rounds at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, my ulster still damp from the mist that swirled through the streets like the breath of some primordial beast. The day had been a weary one. Cases of influenza, a fractured tibia, and the ever-present melancholy of the poor wretches who sought succor in the charity wards. My boots, caked with the mud of Whitechapel, had left faint prints upon the hearthrug. I had not the heart to summon Billy to polish them anew. Instead, I sank into my accustomed armchair, stretched my chilled fingers toward the fire, and accepted with gratitude the glass of whiskey Holmes pressed into my hand without a word. He had been silent since my entrance, his keen gray eyes fixed upon the agony column of the Times which lay unfolded across his knee. The paper rustled faintly as he turned a page. The only sound save the crackle of coal and the distant cry of a costermonger somewhere below in the street. At length he spoke, his voice low and precise as though continuing a conversation already in progress within his mind. "You bring the scent of the river with you, Watson. The tide must be high. The fog carries the tang of Rotherhithe." I smiled, accustomed to his uncanny observations. "Indeed, Holmes." The cabman took the embankment road. The mist rose from the water like steam from a cauldron. One could scarcely see the lamppost 10 yards ahead. He gave a soft exclamation of satisfaction, folding the newspaper with a crisp snap. "Excellent. The atmospheric conditions are precisely what I require. A fog such as this breeds crime, Watson. Crime and concealment. Mark my words, before the night is out we shall have a visitor." I raised an eyebrow. "Another cipher in the personal column? Or have you tired of the stock exchange and taken to prophecy?" Holmes's lips curved in that familiar half-smile, at once amused and predatory. "Neither, my dear fellow, merely deduction. Observe, the barometer falls, the wind veers to the east, and the streets are all but deserted. In such weather, only those with urgent purpose venture forth. And urgency, Watson, is the mother of confession." Before I could reply, there came a sharp, imperative knock at the street door. 3 measured raps, followed by a pause, then 2 more. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "There, precisely as I predicted. Mrs. Hudson will admit our client within the minute." I set down my glass, curiosity piqued. "Client? You speak as though you know them already." "Hardly," he said, rising with that lithe, noiseless grace that always reminded me of a panther uncoiling. "But I know the type." The knock was neither timid nor arrogant, urgent yet controlled. A woman, I should say, of education and breeding, but in distress. Note the interval between the raps, 3, pause, 2, a pattern often used by those who fear pursuit and wish to signal without words. I had barely time to marvel at this when Mrs. Hudson's measured tread sounded upon the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, her kindly face flushed from the climb, a calling card held between her fingers. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she announced, a note of concern in her voice. She would give no name, only that the matter is of life and death. She seems most agitated. Her cloak is soaked through and her hands tremble so she could scarce hold the card. Holmes took the card with a nod of thanks. It was of heavy cream stock, the edges gilt, bearing only the engraved initials E.T. in elegant script. He turned it over, noting the faint watermark of a Kensington stationer, then handed it to me. "Show her up, Mrs. Hudson, and perhaps a pot of your excellent coffee. Our visitor will need warming." Our landlady withdrew, and moments later the stairs creaked beneath a lighter, more hurried step. The door opened to reveal a figure that might have stepped from the pages of a Gothic romance. She was young, 25 at most, clad in a cloak of dark green velvet, the hood thrown back to reveal a wealth of auburn hair escaping in damp curls from beneath a modest bonnet. Her face was pale as alabaster, the cheekbones high, the mouth sensitive, but it was her eyes that arrested me, large of a luminous hazel shot with green and wide with a fear she struggled to conceal. In one gloved hand she clutched a small reticule of black silk, the other pressed against her bosom as though to still a fluttering heart. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" Her voice was low, cultivated yet threaded with strain. "I am told you are the one man in London who might aid me." Holmes bowed slightly, gesturing to the basket chair opposite his own. "You have the advantage of me, madam, but pray be seated. Dr. Watson, my friend and colleague, is discretion itself. You may speak freely." She hesitated upon the threshold, her gaze darting about the room as though expecting some hidden menace to materialize from the shadows. Then, with a visible effort, she crossed to the chair and sank into it, the wet hem of her cloak pooling upon the rug like spilled ink. Mrs. Hudson entered behind her with the coffee tray. The aroma of mocha filled the air, and I noted with approval that our visitor accepted a cup with trembling fingers, the porcelain rattling faintly against the saucer. Holmes resumed his seat, his attitude one of courteous attention, yet I knew that keen brain was already cataloging every detail. The quality of her gloves, kid leather, expensive but worn at the fingertips. The mud upon her boots, Kensington clay flecked with gravel from the Brompton Road. The faint scent of lavender water mingled with the sharper note of carbolic soap. "Compose yourself, miss," he prompted gently. "Thorne," she supplied, setting the cup down with care. "Miss Eliza Thorne. I reside at number 17, Abingdon Villas, Kensington. The matter concerns my uncle, Professor Archibald Thorne, late of the British Museum's Department of Antiquities and a scholar of international repute." Holmes's eyebrow arched a fraction. "The name is not unknown to me. His monograph on medieval alchemical symbols was reviewed favorably in the Athenaeum last spring. Pray continue." Miss Thorne drew a steadying breath. "2 nights ago, Tuesday last, my uncle was found dead in his private laboratory. The room was locked from within, the windows barred, and every lamp extinguished. He lay across his desk, a vial of prussic acid clutched in his rigid fingers, and upon the walls were scrawled strange symbols in charcoal. Symbols the police declare to be the ravings of a disordered mind. They have ruled it suicide, Mr. Holmes, but I know it to be murder." Her voice broke upon the final word, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. I leaned forward, medical instinct aroused. "Forgive me, Miss Thorne, but might your uncle have suffered some depression of spirits? Scholarly men are not immune to melancholy." She shook her head vehemently, the auburn curls dancing. "Never! Uncle Archibald was the most rational of men. His work consumed him, yes, but with passion, not despair. Only a fortnight ago he wrote to me from Oxford, exulting over a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of light and shadow. He spoke of an artifact, an ancient crystal known as the dark prism, which he had acquired at great cost. He believed it held the key to phenomena dismissed as mere superstition. Holmes leaned forward, his thin fingers steepled beneath his chin. The dark prism. Intriguing. Describe it, if you please. Miss Thorne's eyes grew distant as though seeing the object before her. It is a multifaceted crystal, black as midnight, yet shot through with veins of silver. Legend claims it was fashioned by alchemists of the Black Forest in the 14th century to harness shadows themselves. Uncle dismissed the supernatural aspects, of course. He was a scientist. But he believed the prism's refractive properties could explain certain optical illusions recorded in medieval texts. He intended to present his findings to the Royal Society next month. And this presentation, Holmes interposed, was it anticipated with envy by his colleagues? A shadow crossed her face. There were rivalries. Dr. Elias Crow of University College accused Uncle of plagiarism, and there were anonymous letters, threats, veiled but unmistakable. The last arrived the very morning of his death. She opened her reticule and withdrew a folded sheet, much creased and bearing a torn corner. I found this in his study, hidden beneath a folio of D's Monas Hieroglyphica. It is incomplete, but read it, Mr. Holmes. He took the paper with care, holding it to the lamplight. The handwriting was spidery, the ink faded to brown. The dark ones will not be denied. Return the prism or face the abyss. Your secrets are known, Thorne. Your blood secrets. Midnight approaches. Holmes's eyes narrowed to slits. Dark, he murmured. Capitalized thus. An acronym, perhaps, or a signature. The paper is handmade, watermarked with the crest of a Chelsea stationer patronized by the aristocracy. The tear is fresh, the edges unfrayed, torn in haste. Watson observed the ink, iron gall but diluted with a modern aniline dye. The writer is educated yet careless. He returned the note to Miss Thorne, who clutched it as though it burned her fingers. The police dismissed it as a student prank, she said bitterly. Inspector Lestrade, he of Scotland Yard, spent scarce 10 minutes in the laboratory before pronouncing it suicide. But Uncle loathed darkness. He worked always by bright gaslight, even in daytime. And the symbols upon the walls, they were not random. I recognized one from his notes. A sigil meaning shadow unbound. Holmes rose abruptly, pacing the room with that restless energy I knew heralded the scent of the chase. The locked laboratory, the extinguished lamps, the cryptic warning, the arcane symbols, each a thread in the tapestry. Miss Thorne, you have done well to bring this to me. Dr. Watson and I shall examine the scene at first light. Until then, return to your home and speak of this to no one. Watson, my glass. Let us drink to the unraveling of shadows. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The gray dawn that followed was one of those London mornings when the sun itself seems to have taken offense at the city and refuses to rise. A pallid, watery light filtered through the fog as Holmes and I descended the 17 steps of 221B and hailed a hansom in Baker Street. The horse's breath steamed in the chill air. The cabman, muffled to the eyes in a woolen comforter, touched his whip to his hat and set off at a brisk trot toward Kensington. Holmes was silent during the journey, his gloved fingers drumming a soft tattoo upon the windowsill. I knew better than to interrupt his reverie. The great brain was already sifting the facts Miss Thorne had laid before us like a chemist separating elements in a crucible. For my own part, I turned over the details in a more pedestrian fashion. A locked room, extinguished lamps, a vial of prussic acid, and those curious symbols upon the wall. Each fact seemed to contradict the last. Yet Holmes had declared it murder, and murder it must be. Abingdon Villas proved to be a terrace of substantial red brick houses, each with its own area railings and a flight of stone steps leading to a glossy black door. Number 17 was distinguished only by the black crepe bow upon the knocker and the drawn blinds at every window. Miss Thorne received us in the morning room, her face pale but composed. She had exchanged last night's velvet cloak for a simple gown of dove-gray wool, the severity of which accentuated the delicate lines of her throat and wrists. "The laboratory is in the attic," she said, leading us upward. "Uncle kept it strictly private. Even the housemaid was forbidden to enter." The stairs grew narrower as we ascended, the air thick with the scent of old books and chemical reagents. At the top landing, a baize-covered door confronted us, its brass knob polished to a dull gleam. Miss Thorne produced a key from her chatelaine and turned it in the lock with a click that echoed like a pistol shot in the stillness. The room beyond was larger than I had expected, running the full length of the house beneath the sloping eaves. Skylights of frosted glass admitted a wan, diffused light. Beneath them stretched a chaos of scholarly endeavor. Shelves groaned beneath folios bound in vellum and calf. Retorts and alembics crowded a deal table stained with acids. A human skeleton grinned from one corner, its joints wired with copper. In the center stood the late professor's desk, an oak monstrosity littered with manuscripts, a brass microscope, and the infamous dark prism. The crystal lay upon a square of black velvet, seeming to drink the light rather than reflect it. It was perhaps the size of a man's fist cut into a dodecahedron of perfect symmetry, its facets so dark they appeared depthless. I reached out instinctively, then drew back. The thing exerted a strange repulsion as though it resented observation. Holmes, however, lifted it without hesitation, turning it slowly between his fingers. "Obsidian, but of exceptional purity," he murmured. "Note the silver inclusions, natural, not artificial. Your uncle acquired this from whom, Miss Thorne?" "From a Mr. Silas Blackwood, an antiquities dealer in Whitechapel. Uncle paid 50 guineas, an exorbitant sum, but he declared it worth 10 times that for its scientific value." Holmes replaced the prism and moved to the door. The bolt was of heavy iron, thrown across from the inside. There were no scratches upon the metal, no dents in the surrounding wood. "Untampered," he said. "The windows next." They were narrow, set high in the wall, and secured by iron bars thick as my thumb. The glass was intact, the putty fresh. Holmes produced his lens and examined the sill minutely. No footprints, no displaced dust. Yet a man died here, and died violently. I turned to the chalk outline upon the floorboards where Professor Thorne had fallen. The desk bore a dark stain, dried blood mingled with the prussic acid that had spilled from the vial. The vial itself lay upon a side table, corked and labeled in the professor's spidery hand. Acid, hydrocyanic, dill. A single drop upon the blotter had eaten a hole clean through the paper. "Instantaneous death," I observed. "Convulsions would have been brief but severe. Yet the chair is unmoved, the inkstand undisturbed. Curious." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Precisely, Watson. A man in agony does not die tidily. Someone arranged the scene." He moved to the walls where the charcoal symbols still lingered like the graffiti of a fevered mind. There were 7 in all, arranged in a rough circle about the desk. Holmes traced one with a gloved finger, an inverted triangle bisected by a vertical line terminating in a loop. "Enochian," he said softly. "The angelic script of Dr. John Dee. Your uncle was conversant with the occult, Miss Thorne." "He studied it as history, never as belief," she replied. "He lectured on the symbolism of alchemy at the Royal Institution. These marks, they are warnings, Mr. Holmes. Shadow unbound. The veil thins, dark comes. Holmes's lens traveled over the charcoal. Drawn with the left hand, note the angle of the strokes. Yet your uncle was right-handed. I observed his penmanship in the laboratory log. Moreover, the lines are smudged outward as though the artist leaned against the wall while writing. Our murderer is taller than the professor by 3 inches at least. A soft gasp escaped Miss Thorne. Then Uncle did not draw them in despair. Impossible. He was already dead when they were made. I felt the familiar thrill of the chase. But the darkness, every lamp extinguished, yet the gas cocks are open, the mantles intact. Holmes strode to the nearest bracket lamp and struck a vesta. The flame leapt up, steady and bright. Full pressure, no shortage of gas. He extinguished it and moved to the fireplace. A small grate set into the chimney breast. The ashes were cold, but when he thrust his arm upward, soot cascaded down like black snow. "Ah," he exclaimed, "the flue is wide, 18 inches at least. A slender man might descend with ease. Observe the soot upon the hearth, disturbed, and recently. Footprints, Watson, faint but unmistakable. Our murderer entered and left by the chimney." Miss Thorne's hand flew to her throat. "But the laboratory is 4 stories up. Who could climb such a height?" "Someone desperate or practiced. A sweeps boy, perhaps, or a cracksman familiar with rooftops." Holmes brushed soot from his cuff. "We must question the staff." The butler, Hargrove, was a tall, lantern-jawed man with the stiff bearing of an old soldier. He admitted hearing a cry at midnight, but insisted the door was bolted when he arrived. The housemaid, Jenny, a pert girl of 19, confessed to seeing a cloaked figure upon the roof 2 nights before the murder. Tall as a lamp-post he were, and silent as the grave. As we descended the stairs, Holmes paused upon the first landing. "One final detail, Watson. Note the scrap of paper beneath the desk, torn from a receipt. Phosphorus white 1 Oz, delivered 10th inst. Phosphorus glows in darkness, does it not? Our murderer required light to work by, yet could not risk a lamp." In the hansom returning to Baker Street, Holmes was jubilant. "The locked room yields its secrets, Watson. Chimney, phosphorus, left-handed runes, and a warning in Enochian. The dark ones are neither spirits nor madmen, but flesh and blood, and very much afraid of Sherlock Holmes." Chapter 3. The Locked Chamber. The afternoon post brought a telegram from Inspector Lestrade, 3 curt lines on salmon-colored paper. Holmes read it once, lips curling in that familiar sardonic smile, and tossed it onto the breakfast table among the toast racks and marmalade. "Official wisdom, Watson. The Yard sees a locked door and a poison bottle, and the brain shuts like a clam. Pass the shag." I obeyed, watching him fill his cherry wood pipe with the coarse black tobacco he reserved for moments of irritation. Sunlight, rare enough in London, slanted through the bow window of 221B, gilding the dust motes that drifted above the chemical corner. The room smelled of coffee, coal smoke, and the faint, acrid tang of the phosphorus Holmes had been experimenting with since dawn. A glass dish upon the table glowed with a sickly green light where a pellet of the stuff lay submerged in oil. "Phosphorus again?" I asked. "Elementary, my dear doctor. The receipt we found beneath the desk, 1 Oz white phosphorus, delivered 10th instant, was addressed to Professor Thorne, yet the laboratory contained none. Ergo, the murderer brought his own supply. Observe." He lifted the dish. The pellet flared into ghostly flame the instant air touched it, then subsided into a steady luminescence. "A thief in darkness needs a lantern he dare not strike. This provides light without heat, without sound, and crucially without betraying his presence to the street below." I nodded, impressed as always. "But the locked door, Holmes. Even granting the chimney, how did the bolt slide home after the killer departed?" Holmes's eyes sparkled. A pretty problem. Let us reconstruct. From his pocket he drew a length of silken fishing line and a small brass screw-eye. Picture the scene. The murderer descends the chimney, administers the poison, arranges the tableau. He must now leave the room apparently bolted from within. Solution. He passes this line through the staple of the bolt, carries both ends to the keyhole and draws the bolt across from the outside. He demonstrated upon our own sitting room door. The line whispered through the keyhole, a gentle tug, and the bolt shot home with a decisive click. A drop of gum arabic upon the knot, a touch of acid to sever the thread, presto! The line falls inside the room, invisible to casual search. Lestrade, of course, looked no further than the keyhole itself. I whistled softly. Diabolical. Merely practical, Holmes corrected. The method is described in Gaboriau's Monsieur Lecoq, a volume your uncle possessed, Miss Thorne informed us. Our murderer is well read. A knock heralded Billy with a second telegram. This one from Dr. Elias Crowe, the rival scholar, requesting an interview at his Bloomsbury chambers at 3. Holmes's brow arched. The spider invites the fly. We accept. Bloomsbury in the afternoon sun was all plane trees and soot-blackened stone. Crowe's rooms lay above a bookseller's up a narrow stair that smelled of vellum and candle wax. The man himself opened the door, a corpulent figure in a bottle-green frock coat, mutton-chop whiskers bristling with indignation. Mr. Holmes, I trust you are not here to harass an innocent man. Thorne's death was tragic, but self-inflicted. The fellow dabbled in matters beyond his ken. Holmes stepped inside without invitation, his gaze sweeping the room. Shelves sagging under folios of medieval Latin, a human skull used as a paperweight, and, most telling, a charcoal sketch upon the blotter depicting the identical Enochian sigil we had seen in the laboratory. Curious ornament for a rationalist, Holmes observed, tapping the sketch. Drawn recently, I perceive the charcoal dust is fresh. Crowe flushed crimson. A mere doodle. Thorne and I corresponded on symbolic logic. He sent me rubbings. Left-handed rubbings? Holmes's tone was silk over steel. Your right hand bears ink stains, Doctor, but the pressure ridges in the charcoal are reversed. You drew this yourself after visiting the laboratory, perhaps? Crowe blustered. I was at the Royal Society lecture on Tuesday night. 50 witnesses. From 8 until 11, Holmes interrupted. The professor died near midnight. Ample time for a man familiar with the rooftops of Kensington to return home by 1. He moved to a cabinet and opened it without ceremony. Inside lay a coil of silken line and a bottle labeled gum Arabic solution. Crowe's face went the color of old parchment. Coincidence, he sputtered. Coincidence is a crutch for the unimaginative, said Holmes. Watson, note the mud upon his boots. Kensington clay flecked with Brompton gravel. Identical to the specks upon Miss Thorne's hem. I confess I had not noticed, but a glance confirmed it. The same reddish grit clung to Crowe's soles. The man sank into a chair, mopping his brow. I merely visited to reason with Thorne, he stammered. He was alive when I left, I swear it. Holmes regarded him for a long moment, then turned on his heel. Come, Watson. Dr. Crowe has told us all he intends for now. In the hansom returning to Baker Street, I ventured, blackmail. Or terror, Holmes replied. Crowe is a coward, not a killer. Someone frightens him more than we do. Note the tremor in his left hand. Morphia. Our murderer keeps him supplied, perhaps in exchange for silence. Evening found us once more in the laboratory at Abingdon Villas. Holmes had dismissed the household and locked the door behind us. The skylight above was now a square of indigo. Gas jets hissed softly, throwing long shadows across the runes upon the wall. Reenactment, Holmes announced. "You are the professor, Watson. Sit at the desk." I obeyed, feeling faintly ridiculous. Holmes produced a stoppered flask from his pocket. Harmless colored water, I assumed, and mimed forcing it to my lips. I clutched at his wrist in simulated struggle. The chair rocked but did not topple. "See?" The body falls forward across the desk, yet Thorne was found half-turned, as though surprised from behind. Ergo, two assailants, or one who moved with extraordinary speed. He crossed to the fireplace and peered up the chimney. Soot again. Fresh. Someone has been here since morning. From the grate he lifted a scrap of black cloth caught upon a nail. Wool, fine quality, torn in haste. Our visitor returned for something. A soft scrape overhead made us both freeze. Holmes extinguished the gas. Darkness swallowed the room. Another scrape, then silence. I felt for my revolver. "Steady," Holmes whispered. "The skylight." A faint silhouette appeared against the glass, a gloved hand working at the latch. The pane swung inward. A figure in black dropped cat-like onto the beams. Moonlight glinted on steel. Holmes struck a vesta. The sudden flare revealed a masked man, slight of build, eyes wide above a silk handkerchief. He held a slender jemmy. "Evening," said Holmes pleasantly. "Looking for the dark prism, perhaps?" The intruder sprang, but Holmes was ready. A swift blow with his stick sent the jemmy clattering. I seized the man's collar. In the struggle, his mask slipped, revealing a youthful face I recognized from Miss Thorne's description, the housemaid Jenny's sweetheart, a sweep's apprentice named Tom Pike. "Guilty conscience, Mr. Pike?" Holmes inquired, binding the lad's wrists with his own muffler. "Or merely paid to retrieve evidence?" Tom spat defiance. "You'll get nothing from me, Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Holmes smiled thinly. "On the contrary, your boots are caked with Kensington soot, your pockets contain phosphorus matches, and your left hand, observe, Watson, bears charcoal smudges in the identical pattern we found upon the wall. You drew the runes, my lad, at someone else's bidding." "Who?" The boy's bravado crumbled. "A gentleman in a cloak. Paid me a sovereign to climb the chimney and fetch a crystal. Said the professor was dead already. I swear I never touched him." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "A sovereign for a midnight errand. Generous. And the gentleman's name?" Tom shook his head. "Never gave it. But he'll kill me if I talk." Holmes released the muffler. "Then talk to the police instead. They are less fatal. Come, Watson. We have a shadow to chase." As we left the laboratory, the dark prism upon its velvet square seemed to pulse once, as though aware of the net tightening around it. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Fog. The fog that night was a living entity, thick as wool and yellowed by the gas lamps that struggled to pierce it. Holmes and I left young Tom Pike in the custody of a Kensington constable, with strict instructions to Lestrade to hold him incommunicado until morning. The boy's terror of his cloaked employer had been genuine. A sovereign was generous, but fear of a knife between the ribs was a stronger leash. Holmes stood upon the pavement of Abingdon Villas, collar turned up, deerstalker pulled low. The mist swallowed sound. Even the clop of a passing cab seemed muffled, as though the city itself held its breath. "Silas Blackwood," he said suddenly. "The antiquarian who sold Thorne the dark prism. Whitechapel lies eastward, and the fog favors stealth. Come, Watson. The game grows warmer." We took the underground to Aldgate, descending iron stairs into a cavern of hissing steam and echoing voices. The train rattled through tunnels lit by guttering oil lamps. At each station, ghostly figures materialized from the haze and vanished again. Holmes was silent, but I felt the coiled spring tension in him. The hunter scenting blood. Whitechapel at midnight was a different world. The fog here carried the reek of the docks, tar, fish, and the sour sweetness of gin. Narrow alleys twisted like intestines between leaning tenements. Every doorway harbored shadows that might be beggars or worse. Blackwood's shop lurked in a cul-de-sac off Brick Lane, its sign, a faded gilt griffin, creaking on rusted chains. The door was locked, but Holmes produced a slender pick from his waistcoat and had us inside within seconds. The shop was a cavern of curiosities. Egyptian scarabs in dusty cases, a mummified hand clutching a rosary, shelves of grimoires bound in unidentifiable leather. A single gas jet burned behind the counter, throwing a pool of sickly light over a ledger. Holmes moved like a wraith, fingers dancing across the pages. Entry for the 10th. Prism, black dodecahedral, silver veining. Sold to Professor A. Thorne, $50. Paid in Bank of England notes, serial numbers recorded. He tore the leaf free and pocketed it. Blackwood keeps meticulous accounts, useful leverage. A soft scrape from the rear of the shop froze us. Holmes extinguished the gas. Darkness swallowed us. I drew my revolver. Another scrape, then the faint glow of a bullseye lantern piercing a curtained doorway. "Customers after hours," Holmes breathed. "Stay low." We crept forward. The back room was a workshop. Benches littered with tools, half-finished forgeries of Roman coins, a crucible still warm above a spirit lamp. Silas Blackwood stood there, a wizened figure in a greasy skullcap, spectacles glinting as he examined a crystal under the lantern. It was a twin to the dark prism, but the facets were crudely cut, the silver veins mere paint. "Amateur work," Holmes murmured. "Yet someone pays well for counterfeits." Blackwood started at our approach, the lantern swinging wildly. "Holmes, how? Never mind. You'll find nothing here to incriminate me. Thorne's prism was genuine. This is mere practice." "Practice for what?" Holmes's voice cut like a scalpel. "A flood of fake relics to finance a secret society? The dark ones, perhaps?" The old man's face crumpled. "You know more than is healthy, Mr. Holmes. They came to me, a gentleman in a black opera cloak, face hidden. Offered 100 guineas for every prism I could produce. Said the original must be recovered at any cost. I refused to steal, but I sold them blanks." Holmes lifted the forgery. "Phosphorus paint, clever. Glows in darkness, mimics the veins. Your customer planned to substitute this for Thorne's crystal. When did he visit last?" "2 nights ago," Blackwood whispered. "After the murder. Paid double, but his hands shook. Said the police were closing in." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Describe him." "Tall, thin, left hand gloved even indoors. Voice cultured, but with a rasp. Laryngeal trouble, perhaps. Carried a silver-headed cane." I felt a prickle of recognition. "Crow limps slightly. Old fencing injury." Holmes nodded. "Yet Crow is a pawn. The cloaked man is the knight, or the queen." As we turned to leave, a shadow detached itself from the alley door. A figure in black, face obscured by a silk scarf, leveled a pistol. "The prism, Holmes, and the ledger page." Holmes's stick was a blur. The pistol spun away. The figure lunged with a knife. I fired, deliberately high. The crack echoed like thunder in the narrow space. Our assailant vanished into the fog, a scrap of black cloth fluttering from his sleeve. Holmes retrieved it. "Wool superfine, Savile Row," and monogrammed, DARK, the acronym again. "We are closer than they like." Back in the street, the fog seemed to press closer, as though the city itself conspired to shield the fugitive. Holmes hailed a growler, the only cab brave enough for Whitechapel after dark. As we rattled toward Baker Street, he examined the cloth scrap under a pocket lens. "Blood," he said softly. "Your bullet grazed him, and fibers of Kensington soot still cling to the weave. Our cloaked friend was at Abingdon Villas tonight, perhaps to silence Blackwood." I shuddered. "A ruthless cabal." "Ruthless but desperate," Holmes corrected. "Desperation breeds mistakes. Tomorrow we set the trap." At 2:21 the fire had burned low, but Mrs. Hudson had left a cold collation and a note. Miss Thorne called, left a parcel. It contained her uncle's journal, leather-bound, pages dense with alchemical symbols and marginalia. Holmes pounced upon it like a terrier. "Listen, Watson. Entry for the 5th. D.A.R.K. Darius Arlington Rookwood Keene, alias of the forger who flooded Venice with fake reliquaries in '89, believed drowned in the lagoon. If alive, he seeks the prism to perfect his illusions." Holmes closed the book with a snap. Keene, alive and in London. The dark ones are one man with hired shadows. The prism is the key to a fortune in counterfeit relics. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the gas lamps one by one. Somewhere in its depths, a church bell tolled 2. Holmes stood at the window, violin beneath his chin, drawing a single mournful note that seemed to pierce the mist. "Sleep if you can, Watson. At dawn we bait the trap with the dark prism itself." Chapter 5. The alchemist's secret dawn crept over London like a guilty thief, pale and reluctant. Holmes had not slept. I found him at the sitting-room table, the dark prism before him on its square of black velvet, surrounded by a constellation of chemical apparatus. A faint, acrid vapor curled from a retort. The air tasted of brimstone and wet wool. "Phosphorus sesquisulfide," he announced without looking up. Thorne's notes describe a compound that, when vaporized, extinguishes gas flames within a 10-foot radius. Observe. He struck a vesta. The match flared, then died as he wafted the retort's neck across it. A second match, a third, each snuffed as though by invisible fingers. The room's gas jets turned low, guttered, and went dark. Only the prism remained, drinking what little light lingered. "Instant darkness," I breathed. The killer released this vapor, poisoned Thorne, drew the runes, all unseen. "Precisely." Holmes stoppered the retort. "The chimney provided ingress and egress. The vapor ensured blindness. But the compound is unstable. Thorne's journal warns it must be freshly mixed. Our murderer carried a portable vial." He produced the torn receipt from his pocket. "Delivered to Abingdon Villas the day before the murder. Someone in the household signed for it." Miss Thorne arrived at 9, summoned by urgent telegram. Her dove-gray gown was replaced by black bombazine. Mourning became her, but grief had etched faint lines about her eyes. She carried a second parcel, her uncle's private correspondence bound in red tape. Holmes wasted no time. "Did Professor Thorne receive a parcel on the 10th? Phosphorus compounds?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, Hargrove signed for it. He said it was laboratory supplies." The butler was summoned. Hargrove entered with the stiff dignity of his calling, but his eyes flicked nervously to the prism. Holmes held up the receipt. "Your signature, I believe." Hargrove paled. "Merely following orders, sir. The professor often had deliveries." "Yet you opened the laboratory door that night," Holmes pressed. "You heard the cry, yet waited nearly 10 minutes before rousing the household." "Why?" The man's composure cracked. "A note, sir, slipped under my pantry door. Keep silent or join your master." I feared for my life." Holmes's voice softened, dangerous in its gentleness. "Show me the note." Hargrove produced a crumpled scrap from his waistcoat. The same spidery hand, the same diluted ink. Silence is golden. Betrayal is death. D. Keene, Holmes murmured. "He terrifies his tools as thoroughly as his victims." Miss Thorne gasped. "Keene? The forger Uncle wrote of?" Holmes turned to the journal, flipping pages with practiced speed. Entry for the 12th. Keene alive. Spotted at the British Museum disguised as a janitor. Seeks the prism to perfect his shadow play illusions. claims it will make him invisible to the eye of the law. He closed the book. Keene needs the genuine prism to calibrate his forgeries. The vapor is his signature, the chimney his highway. But he required an accomplice inside the house. All eyes turned to Hargrove. The butler sank to a chair, face ashen. He approached me a fortnight ago, offered £20 to leave the attic skylight unlatched. I thought it burglary, nothing more. When the professor died, you realized, Holmes finished, and accepted another 20 to keep silent. Blood money, Hargrove. Miss Thorne's voice trembled with fury. You let my uncle be murdered for £40? Hargrove buried his face in his hands. I have a sick wife, miss. The money was for her medicine. Holmes's expression did not soften, but he turned away. Watson, the chimney. We ascended to the laboratory. Holmes had already laid a sheet of newspaper upon the hearth. Soot sifted down as he probed the flue with a flexible cane. A soft clink rewarded him. He drew forth a small glass phial, stoppered with wax half full of pale crystals. Thorne's compound, he said, dropped in haste during escape. The cork bears teeth marks. Our killer bit it free while climbing. I examined the flue more closely. The bricks were scarred with fresh scratches. A boot nail had gouged a groove near the top. A desperate climb, I observed. He must have been slender. Or she, Holmes corrected. Note the narrow heel print in the soot. Ladies size 4. Keene has a female accomplice. Miss Thorne, who had followed us, went white. Jenny, the housemaid. She was sweet on Tom Pike, the sweeps boy. They were seen together on the roof tiles last week. Holmes's eyes gleamed. A chain of loyalty and greed. Keene recruits Pike for the chimney, Jenny for access, Hargrove for silence. The prism is the prize. He knelt, brushing soot from the hearthstones. Beneath the grate lay a second scrap. This one a torn theater ticket. The Lyceum, 14th Instance Stalls, seat D12. The ink was smudged, but the monogram D was clear. Irving's Faust, Holmes said. Keene attends the theater, perhaps to meet Confederates under cover of the crowd. Tonight is the 14th. Miss Thorne clutched my arm. Then the danger is not ended. If Keene believes the prism still at large, he will strike again, Holmes finished. We must bait the trap. Watson, your service revolver. Miss Thorne, the prism remains here under guard. Hargrove, you will redeem yourself by delivering a message. The butler looked up, hope and fear warring in his eyes. Anything, sir. Holmes scribbled on a card. Prism secured. Meet Lyceum midnight behind the stage. Come alone. S.H. Leave this at the Lyceum box office, addressed to D. Then vanish. Take your wife and go to your sister in Brighton until this is over. Hargrove took the card with trembling fingers. God bless you, Mr. Holmes. As he departed, Holmes turned to the prism. Tonight, Watson, we attend the theater. Keene will come for his prize and walk into our hands. Outside, the fog had lifted to a damp mist, but the sky remained leaden. Somewhere in the city, a church bell tolled 10. Holmes stood at the window, violin case in hand. One more rehearsal, he said softly. Mephistopheles himself could not devise a darker stage. Chapter 6. A Deceptive Trail. The Lyceum Theater glowed like a jewel in the wet night, its portico ablaze with electric bulbs, Irving's latest extravagance. Holmes and I arrived early, cloaked in evening dress beneath our ulsters, the dark prism swaddled in velvet inside my breast pocket. The weight of it pressed against my heart like a cold accusation. Holmes had spent the afternoon in frantic preparation. A terse wire to Lestrade secured 2 plainclothes men in the stalls. Another to the stage doorkeeper ensured Hargrove's card would reach the mysterious D. Most cunning of all, Holmes had replaced the genuine prism with Blackwood's forgery. Its painted veins now enhanced with a trace of real phosphorus to glow convincingly in darkness. Keene will test it, Holmes had warned. but only after the exchange. By then, the net will close. We took our seats in the dress circle, ostensibly to enjoy Faust. The house was packed, silk hats and diamonds below, the pit a sea of upturned faces. Gas footlights hissed. The orchestra struck up the overture. Marguerite's pure soprano soared. Mephistopheles, Irving himself, strode the stage in scarlet, his voice a velvet thunder. Holmes's eyes never left the stalls. At the interval, he slipped away, returning with a satisfied nod. Our bait is taken. Seat D12 is occupied, a woman veiled, alone. She read the card, then passed it to a man in the row behind. Tall, limps slightly, silver cane. Crow, I started. Crow is here? Keen's puppet, watch. The second act began. Faust's descent into hell was rendered with lurid spectacle. Red lights, swirling smoke, a chorus of demons. In the climactic tableau, as Marguerite was borne heavenward on wires, the house lights dimmed to darkness for the transformation scene. Holmes gripped my arm. Now. In the blackness, a faint green glow appeared in the stalls. Seat D12. The forgery tested. A moment later, the lights blazed up. The veiled woman was gone. Crow remained, sweating profusely. Holmes rose. To the stage door. We pushed through the crush of the foyer, past program sellers and orange girls. Backstage was pandemonium, scene shifters, chorus and devil costumes, the smell of grease paint and hot lamps. The stage doorkeeper, a burly Irishman, barred our way. No admittance, gents. Holmes pressed a sovereign into his palm. The lady in the black veil, which way? The man jerked a thumb toward the flies. Up the iron ladder, sir. Said she was Miss Irving's dresser. We climbed into the rafters, boots clanging on metal. Above the stage, catwalks crisscrossed like a spider's web. Below, the final scene played out to thunderous applause. A figure in black darted ahead, veil discarded, auburn hair escaping its pins. Miss Thorne, I exclaimed. Holmes's face was grim. So the accomplice reveals herself. She reached a small property room perched among the beams. A cubby lit by a single lamp, cluttered with pasteboard goblets and wooden swords. Inside waited Crow and a third figure, tall, cloaked, face hidden by a silk scarf. The silver cane tapped impatiently. Eliza Thorne's voice rang out sharp with triumph. The prism, Dr. Crow, quickly. Crow fumbled in his coat, producing a bundle. It cost me everything, Eliza. Keen will ruin me. Keen is a fool, she snapped. I am the dark alchemical research kinship. Uncle's fortune, his secrets, all mine by right. You were to substitute the forgery, poison him, and leave the suicide note. Instead, you botched it, and Holmes is sniffing about. Holmes stepped from the shadows. Good evening, Miss Thorne. Or should I say Mistress Keen? The cloaked man whirled, cane raised like a sword. Holmes's stick parried. The cane clattered, away, revealing a gloved hand stained with phosphorus. The scarf slipped. Beneath was a woman's face, sharp-featured, eyes burning with fanaticism. Not Keen, but his sister, Daphne Keen. Eliza Thorne is my alias, she hissed. Archibald was my husband's cousin. The prism is family property, stolen by that sanctimonious fool. Crow whimpered. She promised me the Royal Society presidency. Silence! Daphne snatched the bundle from him, the genuine prism taken from my pocket during the interval by Eliza's sleight of hand while I gaped at the stage. I cursed my stupidity. Holmes advanced, voice calm. You climbed the chimney in your brother's clothes. Release the vapor. Force the poison. The left-handed runes, your dominant hand. Crow provided the compound. Hargrove the access, Pike the distraction. But you overlooked the theater ticket, the monogram, the blood on the cloth. Daphne laughed, a brittle sound. Details. The prism will fund a new life in Argentina. Eliza, the rope. Eliza darted to a coil of stage rope, but I was faster. My revolver covered them both. "Drop it!" Below, the curtain fell to rapturous applause. Lestrade's men pounded up the ladder, summoned by Holmes's earlier signal. A green flare from the phosphorus vial, visible only from the wings. Daphne Keene lunged for the catwalk's edge, prism clutched to her breast. Holmes tackled her. They teetered above the void. For a heartbeat, I saw the abyss, 30 feet to the stage, then Holmes twisted, pinning her wrists. The prism slipped, tumbling end over end. I caught it inches from the boards as the house lights came up for the encore. Crow was led away, babbling. Eliza Thorne, real name Eliza Keene, fought like a tigress until manacled. Daphne glared at Holmes with pure hatred. "You'll never prove it," she spat. Holmes smiled thinly. "The vapor residue in your glove, the theater ticket in your pocket, Crow's testimony, Hargrove's note, Pike's confession, oh, I rather think we shall." As the constables marched them down, the orchestra struck up the national anthem. The audience rose, oblivious to the drama overhead. Holmes wiped soot from his hands. "A deceptive trail indeed, Watson. The grieving niece was the spider at the web's heart. But the prism is safe, and the dark case nearly solved." He tucked the crystal into my pocket. "One final act remains. Tomorrow we confront the brother, Darius himself. He will come for his sister, and we shall be waiting." Chapter 7. The Midnight Pursuit. The night air was raw with the promise of frost. Holmes and I left the Lyceum by the stage door, the dark prism, genuine this time, wrapped in oilskin beneath my coat. Lestrade had taken Daphne and Eliza Keene to the yard in separate cabs, Crow trailing behind like a whipped cur. Yet Holmes's eyes held no triumph, only the glint of unfinished business. "Darius Keene is the brain," he said as we stepped into Wellington Street. "His sister was the hand, Eliza the lure, Crow the dupe, but the Forger King will not abandon his dynasty without a fight. He will come for the prism and for vengeance." Holmes had left a trail as deliberate as breadcrumbs. A note to the yard's night desk, sealed and marked urgent. D. Keene, contained a single line. "Prism at 221B. Come alone or lose all." A second note slipped beneath the door of Silas Blackwood's shuttered shop, promised the antiquarian immunity if he delivered the message to Keene's known haunt, the Ratcliffe Highway opium den called the Black Lotus. "He will bite," Holmes predicted. "Pride and greed are stronger than caution." We reached Baker Street near 1. The fog had returned, thicker than before, turning the gas lamps into smudged halos. Mrs. Hudson, roused despite the hour, pressed hot coffee upon us. Holmes refused food, pacing the rug like a caged lynx. The sitting room had been transformed into a stage, the prism on the table beneath a green-shaded lamp, its facets winking. Every chair angled for clear sightlines, my revolver loaded and primed on the mantel. "Positions," Holmes murmured. "You behind the screen, Watson. Lestrade's men in the area, 2 in the street, 2 on the roof. I shall play the solitary genius." He donned his mouse-colored dressing gown, scattered papers as though deep in study, and took his accustomed chair. The clock ticked toward 2. Outside, a cab clattered past, then silence. I crouched in the alcove, heart thudding against the oilskin. At 2:17, the area gate creaked. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, mounted the steps. A gloved hand tried the door. Finding it unlatched, Holmes's invitation, it pushed inward. A figure entered, tall, cloaked, face obscured by a silk scarf. The silver cane tapped once upon the threshold. "Mr. Holmes," came a cultured voice, rasped by old injury. "You have something that belongs to my family." Holmes did not look up from his papers. "Darius Arlington Rookwood Keene, presumed drowned in Venice, 1889, yet here you stand reeking of the Thames and opium. The prism is there. Take it if you dare. Keen's eyes, pale, fever-bright, fixed on the crystal. He moved forward, cane raised. Holmes's voice cut like a whip. One step more and my friend shoots. The room is surrounded. Keen froze. For a heartbeat, I thought he would surrender. Then with a snarl, he hurled the cane. It struck the lamp. Glass shattered, oil spilled, flames leaping across the table. The prism rolled toward the hearth. Holmes sprang. I fired into the ceiling. Keen vaulted the sofa, snatched the crystal, and lunged for the window. The sash was open. Holmes had planned the escape route himself. Keen vanished into the fog. After him, Holmes shouted. We tumbled down the stairs, Mrs. Hudson's cry echoing behind. Baker Street was a tunnel of mist. Keen's cloak flickered ahead like a bat's wing. He darted left into Marylebone Lane, cane discarded, running with desperate speed. Lestrade's men converged from both ends, whistles shrilling. Keen veered into a mews, vaulted a low wall, and disappeared into the warren of stables and coal yards behind Regent's Park. Holmes was a length ahead, breath pluming white. I followed, revolver ready, the prism's weight now a phantom against my chest. A shot cracked. Lestrade's man firing wide. Keen answered with a pistol of his own. The bullet whined off brick. We burst into a courtyard where a brewer's dray stood loaded with barrels. Keen scrambled atop it, using the height to leap to the roof of a coach house. Tiles clattered under his boots. Holmes followed, lithe as a cat. I hauled myself up, boots slipping on moss. The roof slanted steeply. Below, the drop was 20 feet to cobblestones. Keen reached the ridge, prism glinting in his hand. End of the line, Keen, Holmes called. Your sister is in irons, your forgeries exposed. Surrender the crystal. Keen laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You think a stone defeats me? Watch. He smashed the prism against the chimney pot. Facets flew like black snow. But instead of shattering, the crystal opened. A hidden seam, a hollow core. From within spilled a roll of vellum, thick with seals and signatures. The true prize, Keen crowed. Thorne's patent for the shadow vapor, worth a fortune to any government. The prism was mere bait. Holmes's face was stone. You murdered for a formula. I murdered for legacy. Keen edged backward. Venice was a rehearsal. London is the stage. He stepped onto the parapet and slipped. Fog-slick tiles betrayed him. For an instant he windmilled, vellum fluttering like a white flag. Then he fell. I lunged, catching his wrist. Holmes seized my coat. Together we hauled him onto the slope. Keen's scarf had torn away. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but defiance burned still. Lestrade's men swarmed the roof, manacles ready. Holmes retrieved the vellum, scanning it by lantern light. Brilliant, he muttered. The vapor can extinguish searchlights, naval applications. Thorne intended to offer it to the Admiralty. Keen stole the formula, staged the suicide to cover the theft. Keen spat blood. You'll never prove intent. Holmes smiled thinly. Your sister's confession, Crow's testimony, the chimney soot on your cuffs, the opium in your veins. Oh, we shall manage. As dawn paled the fog to pearl, we descended to the street. The prism lay in fragments, but the vellum was safe in Holmes's pocket. Lestrade clapped Keen in irons. The forger king stared at the rising sun as though it were an executioner. Back at 221B, Mrs. Hudson had cocoa waiting. Holmes stood at the window, vellum unrolled beneath the lamp. The case is not ended, Watson. The vapor formula must reach the Admiralty, through official channels, not Keen's black. Mark it, and there is the matter of the fragments. He gathered the prism's shards into a small leather pouch. Obsidian, yes, but the silver veins are platinum, micro-engraved with alchemical cipher. Thorne's true secret. Keen never suspected. I sank into my chair, exhaustion crashing over me. Then the chase was for nothing? Holmes's eyes gleamed. For everything, my dear doctor. Justice, science, and the preservation of a genius's legacy. The midnight pursuit ends at dawn, but the game, Watson, is never truly over. Chapter 8. Hidden Alliances. The morning after the rooftop chase found 221B in rare disarray, scorched rug, shattered lamp, and the faint reek of kerosene. Mrs. Hudson had already summoned a sweep. Soot streaked the hearth like war paint. Holmes, however, was immaculate, dressed for the street, the vellum patent rolled tight in a morocco case, the prism fragments sealed in a small tin box. "Admiralty first," he declared, "then the yard. Keene will talk. Opium addicts always do when the pipe is withheld. But one thread remains untied." He held up a sliver of obsidian caught in the tin's lid. Under the lens it revealed microscopic engraving. To E, light and darkness. A.T. "Eliza," I said, "yet she betrayed him. Or never received the gift." Holmes slipped the shard into his waistcoat. "Come, Lestrade awaits." Scotland Yard's reception room smelled of carbolic and wet wool. Lestrade met us with the smugness of a terrier who has finally caught the rat. Darius Keene sat manacled to a bench, gaunt and shivering, eyes fixed on the floor. Daphne and Eliza occupied separate cells. Crow had been released on bail, a broken man. "Keene's clammed tight," Lestrade grumbled. "Claims the patent is his by right of salvage. Says Thorne stole the formula from his grandfather." Holmes's laugh was sharp. "A forger's pedigree. Let me speak with the sister." Daphne Keene was brought to an interview room. Bare walls, a single gas jet hissing overhead. Iron cuffs chafed her wrists. Hatred blazed in her eyes, but beneath it lurked exhaustion. "You've won, Holmes," she spat. "Enjoy your triumph." "Hardly." Holmes laid the morocco case on the table. "Your brother faces the gallows. Cooperate, and I ensure transportation instead. Australia, a new start. Refuse, and the rope awaits you both." Daphne's defiance wavered. "What do you want?" "The truth. Begin with the night of the murder." She leaned forward, voice low. "Darius planned it for months. Thorne's lectures drew investors, rich fools who believed in scientific alchemy. Darius needed the vapor formula to sell to foreign powers. When Thorne refused to share, Darius decided to take it." Holmes nodded. "The chimney route? My idea. I trained with a circus in my youth, high-wire contortion. The vapor vial was sewn into my sleeve. Eliza drugged Thorne's evening cocoa with laudanum, just enough to slow him. I entered at midnight, released the gas, forced the prussic acid. The runes were Darius's flourish, Enochian nonsense to suggest occult suicide. And the prism? Empty. Darius hollowed it years ago in Venice. Thorne never noticed the substitution. He was too busy decoding the platinum etchings. The real secret was always the patent hidden inside. I felt a chill. Then the fragments are the key, Holmes finished. Micro-engraved with the complete formula. Thorne feared theft, so he split the secret between vellum and crystal. Only together do they yield the full process. Daphne's smile was bitter. "You are clever, Holmes. But you missed one ally." She turned to the door. "Show him, Inspector." Lestrade entered, but not alone. Behind him stood Silas Blackwood, the antiquarian, hat in hand, eyes darting like a ferret's. "Blackwood?" I exclaimed. The old man wrung his hands. I had no choice, sirs. Keene held my daughter, little Ruth, taken from her boarding school. Said he'd sell her to white slavers if I didn't forge the prism copies and pass messages." Holmes's gaze was steel. "You sold Thorne the original knowing it was hollow?" Blackwood nodded miserably. "Keene's design. I was to buy it back after the murder, substitute the forgery. When you appeared, I panicked, sent the cloaked lad to retrieve it." Lestrade growled. "We found the girl in a whopping warehouse, bound but unharmed. Keen's last card. Holmes turned back to Daphne. Your brother's network crumbles. Name the foreign buyer. She hesitated, then shrugged. A Russian attaché, Count Voronin, meets Keen at the Imperial Club St. James's third Thursday of each month. Darius keeps a ledger in the false bottom of his portmanteau. Names, dates, bribes. Holmes rose. My thanks, madam. Transportation it shall be. In the corridor, Lestrade was jubilant. Voronin, diplomatic immunity, but we'll watch him. And the ledger will hang half the West End. Holmes was already moving. The portmanteau, Lestrade, at Keen's lodgings in Bloomsbury. Watson, the fragments. Keen's rooms above a tobacconist were being searched when we arrived. The portmanteau yielded a thin ledger bound in red leather, pages dense with coded entries. Holmes deciphered one at a glance. V. 5,000 shadow vapor, third instant. But the prism fragments were gone. The tin box lay open, empty. Stolen, Lestrade cursed. During the chase. No. Holmes knelt, lens to the floorboards. Scratches here, fresh. Someone entered after Keen's arrest. A soft scrape overhead made us look up. The attic hatch hung open, a rope ladder dangled. Holmes was up it in an instant, revolver drawn. I followed, heart pounding. The attic was a single room under the eaves lit by a dormer window. Dust motes danced in a shaft of sunlight. In the center stood a boy, Tom Pike, the sweep's apprentice, eyes wide with terror. At his feet lay the tin box, fragments glittering like black diamonds. Don't shoot, he squeaked. Miss Daphne, she sent word from the cells. Said if I fetched the bits, she'd free my ma from the workhouse. Holmes lowered the revolver. Resourceful family, hand them over, lad. Tom obeyed, trembling. Holmes gathered the shards, fitting them like a puzzle. The platinum veins aligned, forming a continuous cipher. With the vellum patent, the formula was complete. Admiralty by noon, Holmes said. Pike, you'll testify against the Keens. Lestrade will see your mother cared for. Downstairs, the tobacconist confirmed a veiled woman had visited at dawn, Daphne's maid bribing the lad. The net closed tighter. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread the reassembled prism on the table. Sunlight struck the facets. For an instant, the room plunged into shadow, as though the crystal swallowed the day. Thorne's final joke, Holmes murmured, a lens that bends light itself. With the vapor, it could cloak a battleship. Britain's navy will owe a dead man its gratitude. He wrapped the crystal in silk. Hidden alliances, Watson. Family, fear, greed. The dark case reveals the brightest truths in the deepest shade. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. A storm had been brewing all day, the kind that makes Londoners speak of the wrath of God. By late afternoon, the sky over Baker Street was the color of tarnished pewter, and the first fat drops of rain hissed against the window panes. Inside 221B, the fire crackled high. The prism, now whole again, sat upon the mantel like a dark heart beneath the gas jets. Holmes had spent the morning at the Admiralty, delivering Thorne's formula in person to the First Sea Lord. He returned soaked but triumphant, the Morocco case empty, a sealed receipt in his pocket. The Navy is grateful, he said, stripping off his ulster. A destroyer squadron will bear Professor Thorne's name. The fragments are locked in the strong room at Whitehall, platinum etchings photographed, vapor tested. Britain's enemies will grope in darkness while our ships vanish like ghosts. I poured tea. And Keene? Charged with murder, forgery, and high treason. Daphne and Eliza will follow. Crowe has turned Queen's evidence. His testimony alone will hang them twice over. Lestrade is crowing. Holmes took the cup but did not drink. His eyes were on the prism. Yet one shadow lingers. The Russian, Count Voronin. Diplomatic immunity shields him, but the ledger names dates, sums, meeting places. He will bolt tonight if he smells the noose. A knock, 3 sharp raps. Mrs. Hudson admitted Inspector Lestrade, dripping rain from his bowler. Behind him hovered a civilian in a naval greatcoat, collar turned up, face obscured by a scarf. "Holmes," Lestrade panted, "we've a problem. Voronen's gone to ground at the Imperial Club. Claims asylum in the Russian embassy coach, parked in St. James's Square. We can't touch him without a diplomatic incident." The civilian lowered his scarf. It was Commander Sir Edward Travers, R.N., the Admiralty's intelligence liaison, a man I had met during the Bruce Partington affair. "Mr. Holmes," Travers said crisply, "the First Lord authorizes extraordinary measures. Voronen carries a cipher key, wax impression of the embassy safe. Inside are letters proving he paid Keene for the vapor formula. Retrieve it and we break the ring without touching the Count." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "A storm provides perfect cover. Watson, your revolver, and the prism." I stared. "The prism is evidence. It is also our passport." Holmes wrapped the crystal in black silk. "Voronen believes it the master copy. We offer an exchange. Prism for the key. He cannot resist." The rain was now a deluge, wind rattling the sashes. We piled into a growler, Travers beside the driver, Lestrade and 2 constables on the box. Lightning forked over the Thames as we crossed Westminster Bridge. The river churned like ink. St. James's Square was a lake of mud. The embassy coach, a lacquered brougham with the double-headed eagle, stood beneath a gas lamp, horses steaming. Voronen's silhouette was visible through the window, smoking a cigarette, calm as a statue. Holmes stepped into the rain, prism raised like a talisman. "Count Voronen, a word!" The Count lowered the glass. He was younger than I expected, mid-30s, blonde beard trimmed to a point, eyes cold as Baltic ice. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said in perfect English, "you bring me a pretty bauble. Step inside, out of the wet." Holmes climbed aboard. I followed, revolver hidden beneath my coat. The interior smelled of Havana tobacco and vodka. Voronen examined the prism by the coach lamp, turning it with gloved fingers. "Exquisite," he murmured. "Keene promised delivery. You honor his debt?" "Keene is in irons," Holmes replied. "The prism for the wax key. A fair trade." Voronen smiled thinly. "Fairness is for children, but I am curious. How did you reassemble it?" Lightning flashed. Thunder followed like artillery. In that instant, Holmes struck. His stick cracked across Voronen's wrist. The Count yelped. The prism rolled across the cushions. I seized it as Holmes pinioned the Russian's arms. "The key!" Holmes snapped. Voronen struggled, but Travers and Lestrade were already at the door, constables behind. The Count's composure shattered. "Barbarians, this is embassy soil." "Parked on the public highway," Travers corrected. "Search him." A thorough frisk yielded a lump of wax in the Count's waistcoat, impression of a Chubb safe key. Voronen spat curses in Russian as he was bundled into the rain. Diplomatic immunity be damned. Back at Baker Street, the storm reached its crescendo. Windows shook. The fire spat sparks. Holmes spread the wax impression on the table beside the prism. "Photograph it," he instructed Travers. "Return the original to the embassy safe. Let them wonder how we opened it. The letters will be copied by morning." Travers saluted. "You've saved the fleet, Mr. Holmes. The Admiralty is in your debt." After they left, the room seemed suddenly quiet, save for the rain's steady drum. Holmes stood at the window, watching lightning stitch the sky. "Keene's empire crumbles," I said. "Voronen exposed, the formula secure. The dark case ends in light." Holmes turned, the prism in his palm. "Ends? No, Watson, it transforms. Thorne's genius will cloak our ships, Keene's greed will fund our prisons. But darkness always gathers again." He placed the crystal on the mantel. For a moment, the storm's flash illuminated it. facets drinking the light, throwing it back as shadow. Then thunder rolled and the room plunged into gloom. Holmes lit his pipe. Tomorrow the courts, the newspapers, the inevitable medal. Tonight, we wait for the final act. As if in answer, a telegram boy hammered at the door. Mrs. Hudson brought the orange envelope upstairs. Holmes slid it open. Holmes's face was granite. The storm hides more than rain. Someone else knew the secret. He seized his coat. To Whitehall. Now! We plunged into the tempest, the prism's silk-wrapped weight burning against my heart. Lightning revealed the street empty save for a single figure vanishing round the corner, a woman in a dark cloak, auburn hair escaping her hood. "Eliza Keene!" I shouted, but the thunder swallowed my voice, and the night swallowed her. Chapter 10. The Light of Truth. The storm broke as suddenly as it had gathered, leaving London washed clean and trembling. Dawn found Holmes and me at Whitehall, where the Admiralty strong room gaped like a violated tomb. The guard lay unconscious, chloroform rag still clutched in his fist, his keys scattered across the marble. The steel drawer that had held the prism fragments stood empty. Commander Travers was apoplectic. The photographs are safe, but the platinum etchings irreplaceable. If that woman reaches the continent. "Eliza Keene will not leave England," Holmes said, calm as winter ice. "She needs the genuine prism to decode the micro-engravings. We have it." He patted the oilskin bundle beneath my coat. "And she knows we have it." Lestrade arrived mud-spattered and grim. Cells checked at the yard, Daphne and Darius secure. But Eliza's maid bribed a turnkey. The girl vanished an hour ago. Description matches your rooftop phantom. Holmes's eyes narrowed. The maid is the key. Find her, find Eliza. We traced the maid, Jenny of the nervous giggle and nimble fingers, to a doss house in 7 Dials. She was packing a carpet bag when Lestrade's men kicked in the door. Under pressure, she confessed. Eliza had paid her £50 to steal the fragments, promising passage to France on a Boulogne packet leaving at noon. "The sea swallow," Holmes said. "Docks at the Pool of London. We have 3 hours." The Thames was a sheet of pewter under a clearing sky. Steam cranes hissed, gulls wheeled above the forest of masts. The Sea Swallow lay at her berth, gangplank down, cargo swinging aboard in nets. Holmes led us through the press of dockers and stevedores, eyes scanning every face. "There," I pointed. Eliza Keene, cloaked and veiled, was mounting the plank, a small portmanteau in hand. She moved with the desperate grace of a cornered animal. Holmes sprinted. I followed, revolver drawn. The gangplank swayed under our boots. Sailors shouted. Eliza reached the deck, spun, and for an instant her veil lifted, eyes wild, mouth set in defiance. "Holmes!" she cried. "The prism, give it me and I disappear forever." Holmes halted at the rail, prism raised. "For Thorne's murder? Never." She laughed, a broken sound. "Murder? Uncle Archibald begged me to end his pain. The cancer had eaten his liver. He had weeks, not years. The poison was mercy. The formula, the prism. He wanted them safe from Keene's greed. I staged the suicide to protect his legacy." I felt the deck tilt beneath me. "You expect us to believe—" "It's true," came a voice behind us. Professor Thorne's solicitor, Mr. Grimshaw, climbed aboard, breathless, a sheaf of papers in hand. "I have the will witnessed last month. Miss Thorne inherits everything on condition the vapor formula goes to the crown. The rest, Keene's doing." She tried to stop him. Holmes's gaze flicked from Eliza to the documents. "Then why steal the fragments?" Eliza's hands trembled. "Darius forced me, threatened to expose the mercy killing as murder. I played along to get close, to destroy the evidence. But when you caught Daphne, I saw my chance to finish it." She opened the portmanteau. Inside lay the stolen fragments wrapped in cotton wool. Take them. Burn them if you must. Only keep my uncle's name clean. Holmes took the bundle, eyes unreadable. The truth, Miss Thorne, is the only mercy now. Lestrade stepped forward with manacles, but Holmes raised a hand. No. She comes willingly to the yard. Her testimony will hang Darius and Daphne, not her. Eliza bowed her head. The sea swallow's whistle shrieked. The gangplank was hauled aboard. Sailors cast off, but the ship would sail without its passenger. Back at Baker Street by noon, the sun broke through, gilding the wet roofs. Miss Eliza Thorne, true name Eliza Thorne, niece and heiress, sat by the fire, pale but composed. Lestrade had taken her statement. Grimshaw confirmed the will. The fragments were reunited with the prism, the platinum etchings photographed anew. Holmes stood at the window, violin beneath his chin, drawing a slow, mournful air. A mercy-killing, Watson. The darkest act, yet born of light. Thorne knew his time was short. He entrusted his niece with the formula's fate. Keene twisted her grief into a weapon. I poured sherry. And the dark ones? Dissolved. Darius and Daphne to the gallows. Treason seals their doom. Crow to exile. Blackwood pardoned for his daughter's sake. Young Pike apprenticed to the Admiralty labs. His mother provided for. Eliza looked up, eyes wet. Uncle's last note, to E, light in darkness. He meant the prism, but also me. I failed him. Holmes turned, bow still. You preserved his legacy. The fleet will sail unseen because of you. He placed the reassembled prism on the mantel. Sunlight struck it. For an instant, the room filled with dancing shadows. Then the crystal blazed, refracting a perfect rainbow across the walls. Light from darkness, Holmes said softly. The true alchemy. Outside, a newsboy cried the afternoon editions. Sherlock Holmes foils spy ring. Naval secret saved. Holmes smiled faintly, then took up his pipe. Later, when Eliza had gone to sign her statement, I asked, Will she hang? Holmes shook his head. Transportation, Van Diemen's Land. A new life far from shadows. The fire settled into embers. Holmes played a final lilting phrase, scarlatti bright as spring. The prism caught the dying light, holding it like a promise. Thus ended the dark case, not in triumph but in truth. For in the deepest night a single candle burns brightest,